Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the African Football HQ podcast presented by Goal Africa. Today, Ed and I are doing our African football year in review for 2020. Ed, it's been quite a year, hasn't it?
Yes, 2020 has been a year like no other. It's been a very difficult year, very hard year. But personally, for me, I think African football and the performances of African players have provided some unforgettable highlights. And I hope in this year in review episode of the AFHQ podcast, we can talk through some of the best bits and some of the worst bits of what has been a very difficult year.
We'll start off with our Player of the Year section where we determine who is the best African footballer across the entire year. Ed, I feel like this year more than ever, or just more of a growing trend, there's more and more African stars playing. So instead of it being a one or two horse race, in almost every league, there's a ton of great African players, and a lot of them have had really good years. So Ed, who are you going for with your Player of the Year for 2020?
Well, people kind of said after the era of Drogba and Eto'o that maybe African football at the absolute highest level went into a little bit of a lull. But I think now we're very firmly in the era of Mane, of Salah. You're going to include the likes of Aubameyang and Mahrez in the conversation. But I think this has got to be a 1 and 2 for Mane and Salah after their exploits with Liverpool, after their consistency over the year. The question is which way it goes. And I think a strong case could be made for either of them. Personally, I would lean towards Sadio Mane. I think what he brought to Liverpool was that bit more, that the player he is, the dimensions he offers, the way that he influences those around him, the way that he changes games, I think meant that bit more to that Liverpool success. However, the fact that Salah has scored already 13 goals this season, whereas Mane hasn't quite hit the heights of last term, that surely has to count in Salah's favour as well. So I'm kind of on the fence a little bit about this one. I'm intrigued to hear which way you're going with it.
I feel like there's been a general consensus that last season Mane was the superior African for Liverpool. You don't really hear a lot of people praising Mohamed Salah or saying that he was better than Mane. This season, though, I do agree with you. Salah is nearing the top of the Premier League scorers chart with 13 goals, I believe. So I feel like it's a bit early. I don't want to weigh this season's performances too much into that, as it's only been a few months. But I do agree with you in that it is a two-horse race between Mane and Salah because Aubameyang, Arsenal have been so great. Ziyech, you can't really weigh these Dutch league performances too well compared to the Premier League. And other than that, kind of like you said, there isn't really that much. There isn't anyone else. So between Mane and Salah, I would go with Mane, but I think Salah would be a close second.
Do you think, because obviously Aubameyang, he won the FA Cup, he won the Community Shield, he scored 3 goals in those 2 finals. He was 1 goal off the Golden Boot last term, but he still scored 22 goals, which was enough for him to win the Golden Boot the year before. If he'd maintained that scoring form this season, would he have pipped Salah or Mane for you, or was the Premier League title success just too much?
Well, in terms of club success, there's been no club like Liverpool where there are Africans leading the show on a successful team. While Aubameyang is leading,
Aubameyang just won the FA Cup.
He had like a good 2-game performances at Wembley in the semis and final, but we can't weigh that compared to an entire season of good performances and victories, most importantly for Liverpool. So while Aubameyang has been playing well and getting the goals, the only thing that could put him in that race is if Arsenal finish like top 4, it feels weird to say, but
Well, you went for Sadio Mane. He was also Solis Chukwu's pick as Goal Africa's African Player of the Year for 2020. So I'm very happy we put Salah in a very proud second and we go for Sadio Mane as our African Player of the Year. I think there are very few people who would dispute that.
Definitely. We'll move on to a more contentious section, Breakout Star of the Year. This year we've seen so many African players break out. And Ed, I know you've quite a long shortlist for this award, don't you?
Yeah, it's been a year where there are a few guys who are on the brink of becoming, or maybe have become, household names, but actually a year ago we really didn't expect this from them. I think someone like Eberechi Eze, what he achieved with QPR last season, and he's already begun to make his mark with Crystal Palace in the Premier League. He deserves a mention. I've been really impressed with Tino Kadewere of Zimbabwe. He scored 20 goals in 24 games with Le Havre last season, but I don't think everyone really expected he would make the step up to Liga and to a giant like Lyon in quite the way he has. And also sticking with France, I would also say Boulaye Dia. Only Neymar has scored more goals this season in Liga than Boulaye Dia. He's also become a Senegal international. Newcastle are reportedly interested in his signature, and he's someone I would also put in the shortlist. However, my pick, I'm going to go for Borussia Dortmund Wonderkid, Yusuf Moko. We've heard a lot about him, about the new Etu, about the scoring records he's broken at youth level. But this was the year when he finally made his Borussia Dortmund debut, becoming the youngest ever Bundesliga player and the youngest ever Bundesliga scorer. You may say it's early days. You may say he hasn't yet proved what he can do. But I think he's already stepped into the senior men's game just after his 16th birthday. And he's my breakout star of the year.
I can't give this to him, Ed. Like, if you're gonna rate it on his youth team performances, where he scored a bunch of goals, that's one thing. But I would discredit that because you shouldn't put a youth player who hasn't played professionally yet for an award of this caliber. And then we did say he did break a Bundesliga record, youngest player, youngest scorer. That's just one goal in 1 or 2 games. You can't give a year-long award to someone for that. And he didn't make the team because of like great performances. He obviously is continually playing great, but it's because he turned 16. So it's more something of a formality than his great performances.
This guy was registered in the Dortmund squad when he was just 14. A lot of players, they maybe, a lot of things are expected of them, great things are expected, but they step into a team maybe lower down the table and they struggle to make their mark. They take their time. This guy has stepped into Borussia Dortmund's first team and he's looking like an absolute natural. He isn't floundering.
One goal, what are you talking about? He's
lived up to the Bundesliga level. Him and Erling Haaland, I think they are going to be a lethal duo for the future. I spoke with Samuel Eto'o earlier this year, and he said that if he could sign one player for Barcelona as the future, as the replacement for Lionel Messi, he would go for Yusuf Moko. And I mean, if Eto'o's saying, I don't think we can really disagree, can we?
Well, he's not an African football journalist, is he? He's a great player, but these players don't have the best of takes all the time. There's more players though. Would you put Osimhen in this young player breakout star bracket?
It's a good point. It's a strange one with Osimhen because obviously he scored 13 goals across an abridged Ligue 1 season last term. And Napoli, that was enough to tempt Napoli to spend seriously big money to take him to Italy. And then in Italy, he's made, in my opinion, a decent start to life there. But a start that in light of the fee has been considered a bit of a slow start, and now he's got injured. So, maybe recency bias means that I'm not as excited about Osimhen's performances so far this season.
I'd also like to highlight someone on the local scene, Ghanaian youngster Matthew Kudjo. He emerged in January with Asante Kotoko. He went viral as a 16-year-old. He scored. He was supposed to be the future of Ghanaian football. He still can be, I hope so. He had a trial with Bayern Munich. He had a great year before going on loan to Legion Cities, where he is at now. But in terms of African players on the continent, there was no one who kind of had more of a breakout coming from near complete obscurity to becoming a household name in the African football scene. So if we're only looking at Africa, I would give it to Matthew Kudjo. But Ed, do you think his performances can compare to the likes of Kadewere or Osimhen or someone else?
I mean, Kadewere scored the winning goal against PSG, the Champions League finalists for Lyon recently, having been a League Two player last season. So I'm not sure I'm convinced by your suggestion, to be honest.
All right, I would have to go with Kadewere, as you said, for his performances with both Zimbabwe and Olympique Lyon.
Not so Mokoku second then.
We're only going for one winner, Ed. I don't know. You can, if you want to say his second to make you feel better, that's good. On to our next section. I'm very excited for this. Best moment of the year. A lot of things happened this year. COVID brought a lot of interesting stuff, but in terms of on the field, the things that actually happened with football, what were some of the best moments for you, Ed?
So I'm stretching the kind of notion of a moment to maybe be a half
season-long performance.
Collective performances. So I'm going to go for one Europe-based, one Africa-based. In terms of Europe-based, I'm going to go both for Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting's goal for PSG against Atalanta, coming on as a sub, scoring a late winner for a player who's been much maligned by yourself, among others, I might remind you. To end up becoming the hero was a great fairy tale story. It's a shame they couldn't go on and ultimately win the title. And also Maxwell Cornet. I was really impressed with Lyon's performance against Manchester City. I was impressed with Toko Ekambi, and I was really impressed with Maxwell Cornet. And that opening goal, for a player, again, who's had a tricky year, having to reinvent himself from a winger to a fullback, excelling in this role against a really elite side in a really the business end of the Champions League, and scoring such a superb goal against the advancing Edison. It was great to see African players in the latter stage of the Champions League, and maybe not some of the names we expect really making a difference. In terms of Africa-based, I would go for the Sierra Leone comeback. Reluctantly, the Sierra Leone comeback against Nigeria, because a lot of people were talking about the Super Eagles collapse. But actually, for Sierra Leone, away from home, against a team ranked something like 90 places ahead of them in the FIFA World Rankings, you're 4-0 down after half an hour. You've barely slept in the hotel. Your flag's been hung on its side at the stadium in an act of horrible disrespect. To come back to 4-4 down, to 4-4, they had every right to celebrate like they won the World Cup.
Yeah, well, I don't think the second leg went too well, did they? So kind of
didn't matter. It didn't matter. For that half, that Sierra Leone comeback, it really doesn't matter what they do next. I think because tough qualifying group. Maybe not so much as expected of them, but to take that point away in Nigeria, we'll be talking about that for years.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go for Ismaila Sarr. I think this should be the winner of the section, ending Liverpool's invincible streak, put in a great performance to defeat them at Vicarage Road, embarrassing the current Premier League winners. If you look at any African player in the performance, there was none that was as popular as Sarr with Watford versus Liverpool in that game.
I mean, it was an excellent individual performance against the Liverpool team, who were really caught out by playing very high on the day and really underestimating Sarr, I think. But it led to Watford's relegation. He ultimately couldn't build on that. He was a player who had done it very well in that one game, but then wasn't able to ultimately take that into keeping the Hornets afloat. So I'm not convinced. Great moment and great for him, but
it's an award for best moment, Ed.
Yeah, but I mean, moment has context. Moment has to have meaning. Has to have significance. Choupo-Moting fired PSG to their first ever Champions League final.
Okay,
and they didn't win it. But that's a detail. He got himself a move to Bayern Munich, who did win it.
So in all three of these scenarios, they had a great moment, but the next game after wasn't so great. So that's not great for this section.
Well, but Choupo-Moting ultimately got a move to Bayern out of it. So I mean, he probably tells himself he won the Champions League that year, which is why I think Choupo-Moting's goal, for the context, for the drama, for the fact that he's been maligned, that's got to be the moment of the year for me.
I think the drama on that was the biggest at any of these, but you did talk about significance, and I want to talk about how we saw during the summer a wave of activism coming into football after the death of George Floyd in America, and in addition to the NSARS protests in Nigeria. So first, the biggest one was Achraf Hakimi, scored for Dortmund and then took off his shirt to reveal justice for George Floyd. Multiple players followed in his footsteps, and a few months later, we saw the likes of Osimhen and other Nigerian players rip off their shirt to display NSARS hashtag. So I don't know how long you've been following football for, but I haven't seen this level of activism come into football ever before.
Yeah, the role that football played in taking the NSARS protest to another level of visibility, because I think with Black Lives Matter, football was almost continuing something that had already permeated deep into the upper echelons of kind of modern pop culture. But I think with NSARS, football's role in that was maybe more pronounced. So yeah, I could give you that one. I'm still probably going for Choupo-Moting, but I'm not going to split hairs.
Yeah, I don't want to say NSARS was the best moment of African football, so I'll go with Choupo-Moting, his heroics against Atalanta. On to disappointment of this season. Ed, I know your negative self has quite a long list for this section, don't you?
Yes, I got out of bed the wrong side this morning, I'm afraid, and I've got a long list of my 2020 disappointments in African football. Not all of these are the people's fault, though. I would say that these are the things that have made me sad, I think, more than anything this year. I look at someone like Jean-Philippe Gbamin of Everton, Ivory Coast international, injured as soon as he arrived in Goodison Park. I tipped him to be the potential breakout star of this season. and he hasn't now played in the whole of 2020. Hopefully he'll come back into 2021, but it is a massive disappointment that a whole year of his career, and who knows how much more long-term damage has been caused. I'm also looking at transfers that haven't worked out. Nicola Pepe, 72
That's
million.
the big one. Yep.
There were flashes in March. There were flashes at the beginning of the year that maybe he was on the right track. You could be excused for starting slowly, moving to the Premier League. And there were hope that he would turn things around. I think lockdown came at the worst time. And this season, there have been 2 goals, no assists, and 1 red card. It's turning into like kind of an all-time dreadful flop. Made so by the transfer fee, I think. And I'd also look at Mbwana Samatta. Samatta has scored 3 league goals all season. 1 was on his Aston Villa debut, 2 were on his Galatasaray debut. Apart from those 2 matches, he hasn't scored a single league goal all season. I think when he came back from lockdown and found himself beneath Keenan Davis in the Aston Villa striking pecking order, and then when Villa signed Ollie Watkins to replace him, he was the replacement for Wesley. It was just absolutely miserable, to be honest. So Samatta's failure in the Premier League and current failure in Turkey has been a real disappointment as well.
But can you say the expectations were very high? It was a last-minute signing to replace Wesley, who was injured. You couldn't have expected a player from Genk to transition completely to the Premier League. I would have hoped he had performed better, but I wouldn't call it like a complete flop.
Well, I think it was a flop. You can argue whether he was kind of set up to be a flop. I mean, he scored in his debut, then he didn't score. And for me, the big surprise was that when Villa returned after lockdown, like I said, Dean Smith chose to play Keenan Davis. And I mean,
who had never had a Premier League appearance before, which is worth noting.
Yeah,
so that shows how bad Samatta was.
Yeah, that tells me that Dean Smith is not convinced by what he's seen by Samatta. And in that game against West Ham United, the final match of the season for Villa, Samatta had a great chance to head home the winner. And he sent a horrible header over the bar. And if Villa had gone down, ultimately they didn't, because results elsewhere worked for them. The whole situation ultimately ended with them surviving. Well, West Ham, who was it? It was maybe it was Mikel Antonio who fired straight at, I can't remember. Fabianski flapped at a Jack Grealish shot or something. I can't remember. But if Villa had gone down and Samatta had missed that chance, I think that would be nailed on as the disappointment of the season.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go for Pepe's performances, but the transfer was in 2019, but there was an expectation that
but
his performances would improve.
Forgive him for the end of 2019. You can't forgive him for that silly head.
Okay, so unfortunately, with a great regret, we give this award to Nicola Pepe. Hopefully next year he will be in the conversation for Player of the Year.
I would also say honourable mention to Ahmed and CAF in general, because
all of CAF.
Ahmed, because it was predictable, and it's a long time coming, and it's a shame because we don't want to be talking about this kind of thing. It's good that justice is happening and that these things are being exposed, but it's so depressing that the amount of money that's being talked about and the amount of nefarious dealings that are being allegedly unveiled about the men who are meant to be the key guardians of African sport. Who can you trust these days, Malek?
Yeah, we'll get to this more on our Hope for 2021 sections. But
if you can't trust the Malagasy football administrator, who can you trust?
Fair, yeah. I'm losing hope in the world more and more every day. All right, to finish our disappointment section, in 1 month, we saw numerous African stars, or dual national African stars, choose to represent European nations on the international scene. And it was very devastating for you, I'm sure, Ed.
When we see guys like Adama Traore, who as recently as late 2019 had flirted with Mali by holding up a Mali shirt, only to then choose to play for Spain, even though, again, it was a little bit inevitable, was such a disappointment. The one who really disappointed me the most was Bukayo Saka of Arsenal, because obviously he was playing so exceptionally in the Premier League. I loved his versatility, and I really thought he would be an ideal fit for this vibrant new generation Niger Super Eagles team. And it's such a shame we'll never see him line up alongside the likes of Alex Iwobi, Wilfred Ndidi, and Victor Osimhen.
Also, we saw two great players who recently broke out, Kamavinga and Ansu Fati, both very young at the age of around 16, 17, 18. Kamavinga for Rennes, bossed PSG, and then he is Angolan. He was born in Angola, but he has decided to play for France. Ansu Fati, also born in Africa, in Guinea-Bissau, broke out for Barcelona, but he has since chosen to represent Spain. Those two players will become world beaters, in my opinion. So I'm very disappointed that they will not turn out for African nations.
Yeah, you could also throw in Upamecano of Leipzig as well. I mean, proving what he could do in the Champions League, looking a class defender, influential in the elimination of Tottenham, and then committing himself to France was a real shame.
Yes, and Anderlecht winger Jeremy Doku also chose Belgium over Democratic Republic of Congo, sadly. But like we said before, there were some players such as Aller, Boli, who have chosen to represent African nations, even if it has come towards maybe the end of their peaks.
This year has been a very difficult year for African football in terms of some of the players, the personalities who we've lost, those who have passed away over the last 12 months. Old and young alike, maybe people have been touched by death more this year because of coronavirus across the world than usual. African football has not been spared, with figures like Pape Diouf and Sidi Diallo passing away because of the virus. Malek, which are some of the deaths, the African football departures this year that have really affected you and impacted you the most?
The one that was the most significant for me was the shocking passing of CAF Secretary General Amr Fahmy from cancer at a very young age. I believe he was under 40. He was very influential in trying to kick out the corruption in CAF. We talked about this a bit earlier with Ahmed. Amr Fahmy was the one who was always working to try and make African football better. If anyone who was working in CAF, he was the only one I could say was actually trying to actively make African football better by ridding corruption from the game. Unfortunately, he's passed away. I would have loved to see him be in the running for the CAF presidency that's going on now. But the only thing we can do now is try and move forward in his legacy and try and kick out corruption.
Yeah, and spare a thought also for his partner, Hannah Abdel Satter, who's a very kind woman and was very generous to me once, although I suspect she doesn't remember it now. I would also like to mention Papa Buba Diop of Senegal, the hero of one of the heroes of Senegal's 2002 World Cup campaign, Premier League stalwart with Fulham, West Ham, died at 42. And on a personal note, I'd also like to mention Kosi Kadagba of Togo, played for ASC Kara in the local league. I saw him play and actually met him in October at the Wafu Cup of Nations where he was playing for Togo. Someone I'd hope to work with in the future, a very talented striker who no doubt could have and would have gone on to play beyond Togo, maybe in another West African league, maybe in North Africa. And he passed away in June after a very short illness, returned to his family home in Davier and passed away there. A real leveler to see someone who had been playing exceptionally well 7 months before to pass away at the age of 24.
We need to talk about Mamelodi Sundowns and how they lost two key players in the past 2 months, both to car accidents. First, Anele Ngonga lost his life, and then just a few weeks ago, their star center back, Mojeka Madisha, passed away in a car accident also. I saw a video of Pizzo Mosimane from a few months ago. He was talking about those two players, praising them, and it's just very, very harrowing to see how those two players are dead, and then he's moved on to Egypt. So, South Africa, we've seen a lot of players lose their lives either to alcohol or car accidents. It's very saddening to see, especially because it's at a young age. And a lot of these players, as we saw with Anele and Madisha, they were in the prime of their careers.
Yeah, Anele had actually just left Sundowns to start a new chapter of his career at Amazulu. And it's a great tragedy. Among the many sad elements of that story, it's a tragedy that we won't get to see what this next chapter of his career could have looked like.
Turning our attention back to the events on the pitch, we'll discuss the best African signing of 2020. Which player moved clubs and had the best performances at their new club? There's been a lot of transfers, especially this past window. We saw some record-breaking moves. But Ed, who's on your short list?
It's a Moroccan 1 and 2 for me. It's between Hakim Ziyech and Achraf Hakimi. I think because of the abridged nature of the season, we haven't yet seen these guys truly make their mark. But I think both of them, in terms of the glimpses we've already seen so far, and also the quality we know they can offer, what they've demonstrated in the past, I think these two are destined to be smash hits. You can argue they're already proving to be smash hits. Just look at Chelsea against Arsenal. With Ziyech injured, people were criticising Chelsea for a lack of innovation, a lack of diversity, a lack of different ways to hurt the opposition in the final third. And Ziyech was a glaring absence. He is exactly what that team needs, and what I'm convinced that when he's back in that side, they're going to take their game to another level. Hakimi, perhaps no surprise to either of us that he's thriving at Inter Milan after having impressed with Borussia Dortmund last term, having a hand in 15 goals in the Bundesliga. I'm actually surprised at how quickly he's having an offensive impact in Serie A at Inter Milan, and they're looking every bit title contenders. And if he can help them sustain a title challenge, then I think that would probably be my signing of the year.
Yeah, I feel like it was a very safe signing from Inter. Like, you can't go wrong with that type of player. On a similar note to you, because of the abridged season, I feel a bit weird trying to give this to someone who moved in the summer, but with the Ghanaian duo of Mohamed Kudus and Thomas Partey to Ajax and Arsenal respectively, I'm very excited for those transfers, and especially for Partey and the improvement that he should have on the Arsenal team. But because he's only played a handful of games, I can't give it to him. I will give it to a January transfer. Part Ghanaian also, Tariq Lamptey from Chelsea to Brighton on a free transfer. The reason I'm doing this, first of all, great performances across the year, especially at the end of last season. But also, he's now linked to Atletico Madrid, Bayern Munich. In just 1 year, after buying him from a free transfer, Brighton can make a profit of maybe 60 or 70 million pounds from selling this guy. So that's the reason why he gets it for me.
Lamptey's an interesting bargain, right? And on the bargain stakes, I would also look at Tosin Adarabioyo of Fulham, signed from Manchester City for a fee that may rise to 2 million, which is absolute peanuts if you're Shahid Khan and Tony Khan and you are running a Premier League team. But Adarabioyo has settled into Scott Parker's defence. He's looking every bit a Premier League defender, and he's also great on the ball. He's also cultured. He can carry the ball out of defence. And my prediction is that at 2 million, that is going to be an absolute bargain.
I think it will be. With all of the summer signings, we just haven't seen enough to give this award to them, which is why I think it should go to someone in the January window.
Hakimi's had a hand in 6 goals in 13 Serie A appearances. Inter Milan are 1 point off the top of the table, and we're giving it to Tariq Lamptey.
It's just boring. Like, we already know Hakimi is good. This is established. I don't know. Okay,
you're the boss.
All right. So Lamptey it is, from Chelsea to Brighton. Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's a great signing. I'm proud of that pick.
You seem trying to convince yourself. Okay.
To conclude this episode, we will look towards 2021 and we'll each name one thing that we hope to see in African football come next year. Ed, what is your choice? What is your one wish?
My one wish is related to Super Eagles recruitment. Before the end of the year, I want to see Ademola Lookman, Ovie Ejaria, Tosin Adarabioyo, and Eberechi Eze all put on the famous green of the Super Eagles. That's all I want.
That's fair. On a personal note, I would hope for good performances from El Nini and Trezeguet, but it's a bit selfish. So I'm going to go with corruption in CAF. Hope that comes to a halting end in 2021, however unlikely that might be.
Yes, may the March elections herald in a truly new dawn for African football.
Yes. Well, that is our episode, African Football Year in Review for 2020. It's been a great year, despite all the terrible things that happened. And additionally, Ed and I began this podcast. We hope you have enjoyed it, and we hope you continue to keep listening. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for watching.